Multi-hazards, all about protecting. Hello everyone, another Multi-Hazards podcast with an exciting topic, Indigenous Activism and Climate Change Adaptation. So let's start out with a territorial acknowledgement. We work, study, and live in a region south of the Stalo, aka Fraser River, which overlaps with the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kikite, and Quiquetlam peoples. These are the names of wonderful First Nations groups who dwell near me here in Greater Vancouver here on the west coast of Canada. So, my guest for today is Ghazali Ohorella. He is Indigenous from Maluku in the Pacific. He always travels to and from United Nations meetings to advocate for the rights of Indigenous peoples. He has many years' experience in the Indigenous rights diplomacy and advocacy scene. Ghazali's passion and goal is to inspire and empower Indigenous peoples so that they can do what inspires them. Ghazali calls himself an idealist. In addition, he describes himself as an anteambulo. Did I say that right? Anteambulo? Okay, I won't try to pronounce that, but this is a term from Old Rome, which meant someone who goes in front of or who clears the path, proceeding in front of their patron anywhere they traveled in Rome, making way, communicating messages, and generally making the patron's life easier. So, how is Ghazali and anteambulo? Well, he's often described by his friends as a machine, quote unquote, working to open up spaces and to provide tools for Indigenous peoples. In doing so, he has worked with many Indigenous movements, organizations, governments, non-governmental organizations or NGOs, and state representatives from around the world. Ghazali is the host of the Gomaluku Podcast, in which he documents his process and talks with Indigenous peoples representatives on a wide range of topics, including their thoughts, failures, the lessons they've learned, their aha moments, and the sacrifices they made to claim their rights. All right, you're in for a treat today. Thus, without further ado, let's get to the interview. Hi, everybody. This is the Multi-Hazards Podcast, and I'm very thrilled to have Ghazali Ohorella. I hope I said it correctly this time. And we talked about a couple of weeks ago on Zoom. So it was really interesting. I don't know, Ghazali, if you do this with everybody or just your personality or what it is, but even though we're from totally different backgrounds, I just catch your vibe. I feel this connection. I don't know why, but maybe you took what is it called? Dale Carnegie course, and you know how to do it with everybody. It's kind of magic. So, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, different people, different personalities. But you got that kind of personality. You can just kind of connect, which is really good. And it's an honor to know you and support the same causes as you. And yeah, it's just good seeing you again. How's your day been?
It's been first of all, great seeing you, and I'm so thrilled to be on your podcast. Really, you run an amazing podcast. So, I just wanted to get that to say that first up front, obviously, and it's been good. I've been busy. Many of your listeners may know, is that right now the UN is having its 3-week climate negotiations. So it's been full throttle for me this week already, and the next couple of weeks as well. Yeah, all day, man. I've been looking forward to your podcast. So this is a very nice way to unwind and still talk about stuff. Because you're always on if you love to do what you do.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's good. And just to let our listeners know that Ghazali has his own podcast. What is it called? Maluku?
Yeah, the Gomaluku Podcast.
Gomaluku. Okay, yeah. That's all one word.
It is. It is my initials, GO, because like you pronounced just now, very well actually. That's Ghazali Ohorella, so GO, and Maluku is where I'm from. So Gomaluku Podcast.
Okay, great. So listeners, check it out. Actually, I found you on Spotify. So Spotify's search algorithms are pretty good because I put in, I think I put in indigenous. And I can't remember if I added climate change to it, but anyways, I found you soon. So good on you, Spotify. Pay us money right now for supporting you and throwing the good word, but it works.
Yes.
So the first question I have for my guests these days is how are you and the people around you coping with the pandemic, which is a yo-yo, which is sometimes horror and sometimes a great pleasure because you don't have to work or whatever. It's just a range of things. And just how you coping with this? It's been over a year.
That's a very good question because for my peoples, my indigenous peoples, it has been a roller coaster ride with all these with the COVID spreading across the islands. But it's been okay compared to other regions and compared to other communities. For me myself. Crazy enough is it feels to me like I'm on a 1 year, year and a half house arrest, because usually I travel to the UN and now it's just being at home, having a very intimate relationship with your webcam at this point, and just trying to cope with it and trying to make the best of it. Luckily, my family is healthy, safe. And so every day my family is okay. I count it as a blessing, and it's so it's a little bit of both, like individual. There's some experiences, but also like as a collective, as my peoples as well.
Okay, that's great. And you're in which country right now?
I'm in Holland right now, the Netherlands.
Okay, so
yeah.
Holland, the Netherlands, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how I didn't really see how they've been handling the pandemic, but I know every country is very different from their neighbor. So, yeah. Now, I was looking into doing this podcast by sort of going to the very, very basic, because it's not like everybody in the world knows about these topics and how to define them properly. Sure. So I'm wondering to start off with, like, how would you define indigenous peoples? Because I know there's like so many different words to describe indigenous people. So how do you define this?
That's a very good question. And thank you so much for asking it, because there's a in general, if you ask like Jim on the streets, like what is indigenous, then they would give you one example of it, or something that they think that's indigenous. Indigenous peoples are in like the original peoples of the land that have been there since time immemorial, and that have been it's a group of people that have been connected through language, culture, and have been maintaining that for generations. There have been attempts to define indigenous peoples particularly by states. However, indigenous peoples ourselves, we believe that the only people that are allowed to define who indigenous peoples are indigenous peoples themselves. For example, in Canada, you have the Cree, for example. Like only the Cree can identify who they are and if they're indigenous or not. Obviously, you need some kind of a description or a working definition of indigenous peoples, and indigenous peoples around the world use the Martinez Cobo study, which includes a working definition of indigenous peoples, which actually outlines what I just now said. Original peoples of the land that have a strong connection with each other and to the land through the culture, and have been able to maintain themselves since time immemorial. And obviously, there are also some other points or factors that he included. So if someone would like to ask who what the exact definitions of indigenous peoples is, I will refer to that. Well, and obviously, indigenous peoples, they go on all shapes and sizes. You have, if you're North America, you have the First Nations, or the Métis, or the Inuit, and or the Native Americans is how most people refer to them. But you also have the Aboriginals in Australia, the Tangata Whenua, or the Maori in New Zealand, and the Endoroi in Kenya. And there are approximately 476 million indigenous peoples walking across this planet. And the funny thing is that, and which is very important to the topic of your podcast, but in general, I would say, is that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is on our territories. So we have been, aside from the definition of indigenous peoples, who we are, we're also custodians. We're custodians of the land that we inhabit, our territories, for the next generation. So that is, in short, what indigenous peoples are, and what defines indigenous peoples.
Okay, I just wanted to do a little aside here. I always wonder, right, if I've never been back to Norway, where my paternal grandparents are from. I haven't been there, but I thought, okay, I'm living on stolen land right now. So I do this territorial acknowledgement. So I'm living on stolen land. So I'm not native, so-called, to the land. I'm native, I'm born here, but I'm not the indigenous meaning of native.
I get it.
But what if I got an airplane and I go back to Norway and then I get on that soil? Now, do I become indigenous? Because I saw you interviewing some Sami people from the north of, say, Norway and those Scandinavian countries. So I kept thinking, okay, so does that mean that the people in the south, they're also indigenous, but they just have another name of their ethnicity? So I was trying to, in those kind of contexts, I wondered who's indigenous, who's not, right? I know that a lot of it also belongs to what happened in history. Because, for example, the Sami were treated like First Nations in Canada, very, very bad by the majority from the South. So sorry, I'm just kind of getting off here, but I just always wonder, because some people were saying that if you go back far enough, we're all indigenous. And then somehow there was this magical time that unindigenized people. And then we kind of, now here we are. So now we have indigenous and now we have non-indigenous. Sorry, am I getting too philosophical here about this?
No. It's funny you said that, because I had a trainee once that was so amazed that he has never seen white indigenous peoples, because the Sami, which you just now referred to, are the original peoples of Scandinavia, or northern Scandinavia, particularly, and the Kola Peninsula. So it's the top of Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and a little bit a corner of Russia. So that's right now they are the only indigenous peoples, according to the Martinez-Cobo study, the only indigenous peoples in Europe. But they doesn't mean that they only live up north in Scandinavia. You have a lot of Sami living in Oslo. So they migrate as well. They move as well. Land acknowledgement is a very, very important thing, particularly in North America, on Turtle Island. That is. I would invite you to talk to one of my Sami colleagues. Actually, I think that they would be a better way in a better position to answer your question. I know a lot of Sami that can definitely help you out with that.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
I know in a lot of people's minds, they have this whole thing about migration, and once we were all from Africa and we all kind of migrated out, but we're talking about mostly current definitions. And then people, for example, where I live, apparently you can go 25,000 years back and you can find, they've done archaeological digs. They found evidence of people living here, of our indigenous peoples who lived here that far back. That's a long time. in one place. So, okay, so let's move into the next one. So climate change adaptation, that nasty word. I was even thinking the other day, why did we use the word climate change? It's just too, it sounds almost good, change. Everybody loves change. Why do we call it climate change? At least the word global warming, it's like, this thing is warming up, right? It's good if you're in a cold country, but if you're in a warm country, it's like, I don't want it any warmer. So we got adapting to climate change. Now, what is this? What is this, first of all, and what's the connection with Indigenous peoples?
Oh, there's a huge connection. And first of all, I fully agree with you that climate change, like you calling it climate change, doesn't capture the severity or the urgency of the issue. So look, global warming is one of the ways that can better describe the urgency of the issue. So at that point, I would very much agree with you. I'm sorry, I'm drifting off. So climate change adaptation. So for Indigenous peoples have been living in harmony with the natural world since time immemorial. There's a good reason why 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is on our lands. We take care of the land. Our identity is interlinked with the land and with the environment, the flora and the fauna and all the elements that are at play. So our lives are very much influenced by what Mother Earth provides to us, right? When you look at climate change adaptation, so what do Indigenous peoples do in terms of adapting? Well, there are, I would say that there are like 4 themes or areas that include the adaptation activities of Indigenous peoples. Obviously, we Indigenous peoples use a lot of land management, so we do a lot of managerial activities. Policy-based, we try to improve risk reduction and all sorts of things. Technological, if you go to, for example, Tuvalu is a small island state in the middle of the Pacific. What they're trying to do is increase the sea defenses, but also try to reclaim land from the sea. So that's also a little bit of climate change adaptation. And also the behaviors of Indigenous peoples or humans in general is like sparing the use of water or in times of drought and everything else. Now, how does that translate into what we do? And let me start with the behavioral things and changes in, for example, food habits. Indigenous peoples, what we do is, we improve forest conservation and revert to sometimes to gathering food when anticipating for bad harvest. What we also do is changing on hunting and gathering patterns based on the changing animal migration, because you can still use your own patterns and your methods, but the animals actually, they have changed. They adapt very quickly to climate change, so you have to adapt as well. And obviously, what we try to do is to diversify our crops, and we like to share our seeds with peoples that have have the environment there's more drought, for example. The funny thing is, with climate change adaptation, Indigenous peoples are also going back to methods and ways that we've been deploying since time immemorial, at least before pre-colonial times, like a barter system, or like sharing and those kind of systems. You have a lot of these around the world. I'm sure that the First Nations or Métis or Inuit do have a similar ways. So you also see that. So we try to do a lot of technological things, policies, That's why we go to the United Nations, for example, trying to include our voice and making sure that all the rules that they make, that they respect Indigenous peoples and our rights, and also our ways of adapting. So that is what I would classify as, from an Indigenous point of view, climate change adaptation. The most important part of it is that everything is with a sustainable mindset. As Indigenous peoples in general, how we take care of the land, we deploy principles that are not used much anymore. We deploy principles like respect, consent, reciprocity, empathy with the natural world. And those are principles that make sure that that everything that we do is sustainable, and that it is not just for me or the person right next to me, but it's ensuring that the next generation, or like a lot of First Nations or Native Americans say, the next 7 generations, that they can survive and thrive and prosper. That is what climate change adaptation includes. It is not just for me today, but it is making sure that we do have an environment that is balanced, that is regulated in a way that it can be sustained for the next 7, maybe 10 generations. And that is climate change adaptation is a word that the UN likes to use. This is our way of life for Indigenous peoples. Regulation, balance, observation. These are all things that we deploy to make sure that that we can survive and thrive.
Right. Like going back to earlier when we were talking about who's Indigenous and who's not, it almost seems there's a big irony here. It seems that the people who are not Indigenous are the main people who did all the industrializing, right? Over the last 500 years, the Industrial Revolution, and polluting the skies and the waters and the land. And now everybody has to adapt, whether non-Indigenous or Indigenous, which is kind of ironic because the main perpetrators have to adapt, of course, but now Indigenous people more so in some ways because of living in the land, but you're also more affected by the land. So it just seems, because I'm staring at my screen with that question number 3 here, what's climate adaptation to you and what's its connection with Indigenous folks? It just seems like a big irony is just staring me in the face. And
yeah, you're absolutely right. Indigenous peoples, but not just Indigenous peoples, also coastal communities, small island states, we contributed to the least to climate change. We, in terms of carbon emissions and burning fossil fuels, we contributed the least to it. However, we suffer the most. And climate change, the thing is with climate change, and that's what a lot of people need to understand, is that climate change, it does not bring new human rights violations or bring new situations that are detrimental to the livelihoods of Indigenous peoples. It exacerbates them. We already had these human rights violations, and we've been trying to say to a lot of Indigenous people have been trying to say, give us a land, because we see that you're not using it right. We see that Mother Earth is crying, or that the flora and fauna needs to regenerate itself. We need to manage it sustainably. Indigenous peoples have been screaming on top of their lungs, actually, that since for decades. A very good point that Iroquois faith keeper Chief Oren Lyons said a couple of years ago at the United Nations. And he started his speech with, "I told you," because 25 years before that, he addressed the United Nations and he warned the UN by saying, like, "Hey guys, climate change is happening. Nobody wanted to believe him. People basically laughed him out of the room. Now it's happening, and still indigenous peoples are being ignored, and still it is our knowledge is being considered as anecdotal or old, rusty, and dusty. And that is the biggest misconception when it comes to the knowledge of indigenous peoples, that it is in constant development. We're still using it, and it's still based on these principles, and is built still geared towards sustainability. So what is mind-boggling at this point is that it's close to midnight. We're very close to climate change, or some would say we're already past the threshold. That still the international community does not want to listen to indigenous peoples that have been on the planet since time immemorial, at least pre-colonialism, and have been able to preserve themselves and be able to survive and thrive. We have the knowledge, and we want to help. And still, it is all people still don't want to listen to us, and we still have to fight. We every day we have to fight for the recognition of our knowledge, of our rights, of our presence in the world, or in the international community. So I fully agree with you. The irony
I'll just say what seems more ironic too is, for example, I've had this midlife, I won't say crisis, I'll say a revival, where I love science. So I take out some science books from the library, and for example, studying geology, and you think, wow, it's a very wonderful topic. You can know about the rocks, you can know about what's under the ground, you can know this, you can know that. But then I was holding this book and I thought, they're not making this knowledge primarily to look at the beauty of the rocks or the natural processes. Oh, isn't it wonderful? How do we live in harmony with it? They're making this science textbook on how to mine, or how to take out oil, or how to extract, or how to tear down the forest, or whatever. That's why they're making these textbooks. It's to kind of abuse the land, as we have been doing through industrialization. It's not primarily for us to appreciate it. While this knowledge is great and it's true and it's scientific, it's natural, it's been used a lot for the wrong purposes. But indigenous people have taken similar knowledge. It might not be put in a science textbook, but it's a similar knowledge of the world as it is, the natural world, and using it. But it's not used to sort of rape the land, to abuse the land, to make it worse than before. It's been used to live in harmony, and how can humans be here without wrecking everything? So yeah, it just seems to be this huge Matrix movie-like contradiction that stares me straight in the face. Yeah, because you're not the perpetrators in 99.9% of the cases, right?
No, and definitely not. And it is such a how should I put it? Because you made a very, very good point just now, that about the textbooks, and it's our knowledge is similar to the knowledge, like scientific knowledge. It is a way, it's another way of expanding your knowledge base. And so right now we have, some people call it science, or other people could call it Western science or white coat science. On the one side of the coin, and the other side of the coin is our knowledge, which is indigenous knowledge. But in a way, it's the same. It's knowledge. It is a way to expand our knowledge base. The only difference is what we see right now is that it is based out of a whole different mindset. It is almost as if our mindset, or the let's say like the books that you were describing, is based out of a finite perspective. As in, all right, let's I'm writing this book, That you can mind this or mind that. From a indigenous point of view, our worldview, our knowledge is infinite. And I think that is something that we, not just indigenous peoples, but people in general need to realize, is that we cannot no longer afford to have the finite mindset. We need to have that infinite mindset, the mindset of taking care of the planet, not just for us, not for tomorrow, or how will I be able to build my house in 10 years? It is about how will my great-great-grandchildren be able to live. That is the infinite mindset. And that is something that we need to keep in mind. And still, yeah, you see that there's some shifts here and there, though, but it's not big enough. And begs the question is, how long are people willing to wait, before they really start to listen to indigenous peoples? And when they do, the question is, will it be too late or just in time? So those are things that indigenous peoples and everyone that tries to advocate for climate justice or social justice, or go to the United Nations to fight for their rights, that's what they have in mind. Is that, like, we need to shift our mindset right now, because if we don't, it is too late. When it's too late, then we can all pack it in.
Right.
Sort of, yeah.
So I'm wondering, why is the United Nations important, and why would indigenous people go to this body as opposed to any other body of, say, politics or representatives or leadership in the world?
It is, you need to look at it as several levers, right? You want to influence policy, you want to make a change. And for example, in Canada, you can go to Ottawa, or if you're in British Columbia, or in Alberta, you go to Edmonton or Calgary. Wherever you can influence decision making, you go to that particular meeting or council or parliament, and you try to influence decision making. The UN is the same vehicle. It's only on the international level, and it is also a very important platform for indigenous peoples to amplify our voices, because most of the times, and I'm not talking about Canada, but in other countries, and let's just say they're not on our Christmas list, it is not possible to walk up to Parliament and advocate for your rights, or say that climate change is real because your home just washed away. It's not in some countries. It's not possible to do that. The UN is a platform that you can say that, and then you can say that to that particular country that you're from, but everyone is listening. All the other countries are listening. That is right. That's why the UN. One of the ways why the UN is important. The other important thing is also that there are a lot of decisions made that affect us at the international level, at the United Nations for one, but you also have the Organization for American States, which is a little bit more regional for the Americas. But decisions are made, and one of the quotes that I use a lot, and I think I've stole it. I definitely stole it from someone. Okay. Is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, or you're serving the menu.
Right.
Meaning,
can I just say one thing about this?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I heard this from an African-American scientist 2 weeks ago, and I have a hearing problem. So I thought she said, if you're not at the table, you're on the news tonight. Because we were talking about climate change disasters, right? And I thought, that's true too, right? If you're not at the table, you're being on the menu is a bad thing. And then being on the news tonight is also. So sorry, I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's a great quote.
And that one is a very good one as well. Maybe I'll steal that one as well, but definitely need to have the proper source for that one. But decisions are made over there at the UN. You just say like, yeah, you know what, I can't influence it at all. I'll just focus on the community back home. That's what you can do. Or you make sure that you're at the table. You make sure that you're part of the dialogue, that you claim your rights as indigenous peoples, as sovereign peoples, and you sit at the table and you make sure that whatever they decide, that it at least respects the rights of indigenous peoples. That once they do a project, for example, in I don't know, Nanaimo, for example, if they do a project and it happens to be on indigenous lands, that these project developers need to respect the rights of indigenous peoples first, as in, all right, ask if the indigenous peoples are okay with it, and this, which is called free, prior, and informed consent. That is partly why we go to the UN, making sure that everything that's going on is respecting the rights of indigenous peoples, because and it is a fight. The UN, in the end, it is a club of states, and it would love nothing more than for indigenous peoples to look from the outside in and make us feel like we're pressed with our noses against the window of a candy store. But we have our rights. We're original peoples of the land. We've been there before the political states that we now call Canada, for example. So that's what we leverage. We go there, we go in there, and we say, hey, we are the original peoples of the land. We have our rights, and we have our knowledge and everything else. So, hey, listen to us, because climate change is real, and you need all the help you can get, and we're here to help. That's what we want to do. So that is, and basically the best thing that they can do as state, what they can do is just to leave us alone. Basically, it's like give indigenous people their rights, their sovereignty, their land back, so that we can help it regenerate and making sure that it comes to life again. Not that it was dead, but it is. That's the best thing that they can do. Give us the land back. But then again, you know how most states are. So what we also do is try to shape policy and making sure that whatever they do, that they ask indigenous peoples, or that they require the consent of the indigenous peoples that are concerned, wherever they could be, in Africa, Asia, Arctic, Latin America, North America, Pacific, you name it, Russia too. So that's what indigenous peoples do mostly at the UN, and why we use the UN as a platform to change that system.
And so, Ghazali, what's your role in particular?
Just having fun in the UN. I love it. Okay. And I say this with the most respect, because there's a lot of people that went before me that have done a lot of sacrifices to get where we are as indigenous peoples. I said this with the utmost respect. The indigenous peoples have been pleading for the rights for their rights. Ever since the first recorded was in 1923, when the then Descahe, Levi General from the Iroquois, went to the League of Nations, pleading for the rights of his people, and was not even allowed in, and not even allowed to speak. In 1924, a Maori leader, T.W. Ratana, tried to do this, did the same thing, and also was denied entry to speak in front of the League of Nations. So that it's been a long history of, and these people, and that's the beauty of it as well. And these peoples have been coming back, pleading for their rights. Like, hey, this is what we need. mostly because we're part of the international community. We're sovereign nations. There are roughly 195 nations around the world, 200 give or take. But that's not including the indigenous peoples that are actual sovereign peoples as well. So, quote unquote, it is to act sovereign. So indigenous peoples, we go to the UN to claim our rights, and we had to build it actually within the UN. Could you imagine that for until what was it, 1977 until 1986, give or take, or maybe even more, indigenous peoples were not considered peoples. We were considered populations, as in like an animal population. We didn't even have rights. So that was a struggle. That was a fight. The first meeting, actually, the conference for indigenous peoples that was organized was called the Working Group on Indigenous Populations. It was on the lowest, on the ladder of the UN ladder. It was the lowest place. You could barely look at it. But indigenous peoples, we went in and we made something out of it, and we expanded and we expanded. And now we have indigenous peoples all over the place within the UN. Now, what do I do? Because you had the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that was adopted in the World Conference. And I'm from Maluku, which is in the Pacific. We have 999 islands, still trying to find one to make 1,000. And we're located between the Philippines and Australia. Yeah, this is my spiel. And every time I include my introduce myself, I do this spiel. 2.2 million indigenous peoples living on the islands. And we have a indigenous governing system but we're Maluku, but we're currently occupied by Indonesia. We used to be independent, but we're now occupied by Indonesia.
Right.
But I won't go into
Holland. You had that Holland connection too in there.
That as well. 300 years colonization by the Dutch. So we first 300 years colonized by the Dutch, and then 70 years, 71 years by Indonesia to this day. We have a traditional governing system. We have a movement, and what I do is I try to be the wide-angle lens at the international level on human rights, indigenous rights, and international relations. I got into this because of my mom. She was the head of our movement, and when I was pretty much in diapers, she took me to the UN, and at some point she was like, I'm gonna take you more often to the UN. I think it's one until my 13th or 14th birthday, or when I was 14 or 15 years old, I was laser focused on becoming an architect. I wanted to become an architect. That's it. No questions. But then it hit me. You had the Métis, you had the Inuit, you had the Ermineskin Cree, you had the Haudenosaunee, and I fell in love with the work, with their movements, with indigenous rights, trying to be that little ant, the fearless ant, fighting as an 800-pound gorilla. I love that. I love that image, the David versus Goliath thing. And so I just rolled into it. And now it's not just my indigenous peoples or region Pacific, but I do a lot within the international indigenous peoples movement. And I would say my niche, others would say differently, but my niche is negotiations. It is to, and it's not like bargaining. That's not what it is. Before people tune out, like, oh, this guy, seriously, come on. But it's not about bargaining. It is about making sure that our rights are respected in whatever the UN does. The UN wants to create a platform on indigenous knowledge. Great. But there are criteria, there are circumstances that we need to, or there's a framework that we need to agree to. And what I like to do is I like to sit at the table, like I said before. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I like to, and being an architect, like you try to create something. Yeah, that's right.
I knew you were going to pull that architect. You're building something,
right?
And didn't exist before.
And that I've been able to narrow it down towards. I like to create this enabling environment for indigenous peoples. My mission, I made it my mission in life to inspire and empower 476 million Indigenous peoples so that they can do what inspires them. And so how do I do it? I try to give wings to Indigenous peoples and their ideas. So that is a little bit my personal manifesto kind of thing. And that's what keeps me going. And because it is a hard environment. It's a very hard environment, but it's no joke. I love to do the work. I love it. It's fun for me in a way that I can shape it. I can see something emerging from a piece of paper that we're battling out with countries around the table, and trying to make sure that whatever Indigenous peoples want, that it gets into that particular paper. So that is basically what I do within the United Nations, and that's on climate change, human rights, biodiversity, oceans, because we're ocean people. I'm also doing it on ocean level. So that is, it's like a, how I should say it. It's what I love to do.
That's beautiful. Now, you were talking about this United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the UNDRIP. Yes. They're taking away the drip, whatever that bad drip was before. You're undripping it. So this document apparently is very historical, and it's very significant, and it's not very old even, right?
No.
What is it?
It is the declaration which includes 46 articles or rights actually that Indigenous people should have had all along. Like I said, Indigenous peoples, we were called populations. We're not even considered peoples. So that was a huge fight from 1977, years and decades of fighting for consideration of our rights as individual rights or human rights. However, Indigenous peoples, what makes us so significant is that we have a culture, that we are peoples, capital P with an S, that we have a collective. What this declaration includes is the collective rights, the collective right to a language, collective right to a culture. So not just individual, which is like the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Those are individual rights. But the declaration describes the collective rights of Indigenous peoples to self-determination, to their land, to their education, to healthcare. And basically, these are not new rights. And indeed, these are new rights that Indigenous people should have had all along. So what happened was, in all these years, is that we as a movement, we've been able to shift the international community from not even considering us as peoples, and making a progress, slow but steady, towards to rights holders, but also to collective rights holders. And that is these 46 articles of the Declaration. But the most beautiful part of it is, because it's not, like I said, it's not old. It was adopted in 2007 on September 13th. The document itself was written by states and indigenous peoples. We had a huge influence in that particular process of writing it. And then the adoption of it as well. It's not like it was a 50-50 vote. It was an overwhelming majority. It was 144 states voted in favor, 11 abstained, and 4 voted against. Now, the funny thing is about the 4 that voted against were the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And all those 4 states, in the next 3 to 4 years, they all changed their position from having voted against to lending political support to the declaration. Now we have in Canada, you have Bill C-15 that is on the table right now. And what Bill C-15 is trying to do is making sure that the Canadian Canadian laws are in line with the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So that is, you can see those subtle but significant steps that Indigenous peoples are making at the international level. and how it trickles down to the local, to national and the local level. So that is also like why it's so important to, why the UN is so important.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, just shifting a little bit more to you're personally, like you're using the UN as a platform. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, you have a podcast, and I noticed that you're very active on all kinds of social media. So kind of, what are you building? Do you have like this kind of big thing that you're building as you go along?
Yeah. Like I started out with a podcast because I really felt that I have a face for radio. So I was super uncomfortable in front of a camera. Obviously, quarantine, COVID-19 happened, and there was no, everyone was super uncomfortable in front of a camera. So I started to adapt as well. But the podcast was built out of frustration, in a good way. Frustration because the UN is a great area for a lot of indigenous peoples. Like, what the hell is happening over there? Like, there's so many things happening. I can't make any sense of it. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to open it up by just documenting what I do, the meetings that I have with people. Some meetings are confidential, obviously, but some conversation that I have, or meetings, speeches, and I wanted to document that so that people have an idea what's going on. And also, I wanted to, like my mom went to the UN when she was 17. I would kill for having a footage or a photo or a audio file of my mom first going into the UN. You didn't have a iPhone back then. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I just start documenting to create for my great grandchildren, so that they know what was going on within the UN, what I did, and learn from my mistakes. Because I try to be very honest and upfront on the podcast about mistakes that I've made, or some things that I should have done better or differently. It's not just for me, but it's also for there could be a little Inuit boy that wants to fight for his peoples and wants to be inspired. And so I imagine that he goes on Spotify and looks up Indigenous Peoples climate change. And then first of all, he sees your podcast, and then the second podcast he sees his mine.
Up first.
Who knows? I don't know how that algorithm works, but and then that he or she or anyone has a way of, all right, this is how it's going, and that's these tiny bits of knowledge and of what is happening now. Not everyone is a listener. Some people are readers, some people are watchers. Mm-hmm. And that's why I try to leverage social media. I try to be super active on Instagram. When I write, I post on Medium, which is like a social channel, right. But for written things. I post a lot on YouTube, and still it's a one-man show still. So it takes a lot of time for me to edit and everything else. But in the end, you do see that people, more and more people are using it as reference, are using it as saving it for later. And that's what I hope to achieve, that people are saving things for later, trying to learn from it, and not like copy paste it, but add it to their repertoire, and like, all right, add it to their base of knowledge. That when I want to learn about climate change adaptation or disaster risk reduction, that they pick out a podcast episode of my podcast, but also of yours, and video, a podcast of the Indigenous Climate Action Network, for example. Like, I'd like to see Indigenous peoples use social media more, because that's the beautiful thing of it as well. We have a phone right now, and which gives us access to the world. So as Indigenous peoples, we're no longer at the mercy of the middleman. We're no longer at the mercy of CNN, Huffington Post, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You can just post it or upload a podcast or a video or whatever, and it can go viral, or you can spread it, distribute it across the world. So I'd like to see Indigenous peoples use that more to bring awareness to the issues, including climate change adaptation. Wouldn't it be fun like that a community, a coastal community in northern British Columbia, that they just recorded, like, all right, hey guys, this is what we're doing right now to in terms of climate change adaptation. It sounds corny and it sounds childish, but it is super important right now, because there are kids watching right now and they want to be inspired. They want to know, like, what can we do to preserve my future. So that is in a way like why I do the podcast.
No, it's great. I've been an English teacher before, so there's a couple proverbs I think of when I think of Indigenous peoples. One is out of sight, out of mind, right? So, for example, if you don't show up, if we don't hear, it's almost like you don't exist, which is really sad. That's sort of the sad proverb. But there's another one: the squeaky wheel gets the grease or the oil, right? So the more you shout out, the more you talk, people are going to pay attention eventually, right?
Obviously,
it's good.
Yeah.
So that's why, for example, they had the climate protest. Sometimes we think protesting is a waste of time. It's like, why am I going out there? And what if the police get all rough on me? This is risky and I'm taking my day off. What am I doing protesting? And then some old man who's watching, he might support me, or he might say, who's that crazy young person there on the streets protesting? They should be in school. They should be at work. But protesting is kind of like the squeaky wheel, getting out there and just showing up at the United Nations, speaking your voice. That's right. The hand is going to come and, you want to take that grease can out of that hand and oil yourself instead of having somebody else oil you.
Yeah, definitely. It is like a protest or actions. That's what they call it nowadays. At least that's what I heard. Are important. Advocacy is important. Diplomacy is important. Like you need to push and pull from all sides. To if you want to move something, you have to do it collectively, or at all levels, use all dimensions. And I think that is why not use platforms like podcasts or social media, whatever, because people are so much used to swiping left and right and up and down these days. Why not use it to our advantage as well? And diplomats are on social media, on LinkedIn, or on Twitter, and so you can. So why it is, I think that in these peoples, and there's a lot of people in these people out there right now actually that leverage social media at this point. I'm not saying that we're that we're old or not using it, but I love to see them use less press releases and more social media posts, because you can see that it's making a huge difference. And for a lot of people, Indigenous peoples, like for a lot of non-Indigenous peoples, Indigenous people was I don't know what it is. Is it the people that were killed in Scotland? Are they Indigenous peoples, or is it the people in Africa who are Indigenous peoples? And by creating a podcast or an Instagram account, and say, hey guys, I'm here. You can do it on your own terms, and you can just say what you want to say. You're not censored in any way. Obviously, you do keep it like family friendly, obviously, but you no longer have to write a press release and beg for the mercy from CNN or MSNBC or all these major news outlets. You can do it yourself.
You don't have to wait for BBC to do a documentary on you.
No, or David Attenborough to narrate your documentary. No, you don't have to wait.
Right. I just want to mention something. There's this First Nations fellow, and I think he's got a mobile recording unit in a truck or something, and he brings it all across Canada to these remote places, and he gets the teenagers to sing, and they do like rap and kind of singing rap videos, and they're very high quality. And then I remember just watching these, but I kind of weep at these things easily, right? It's like my wife bugs me. She's like, "Are you a man? Why are you weeping all the time?" And I'm like,
"Hey, we're allowed to weep.
At least I'm not weeping for myself all the time. At least you weep for somebody else." But I just saw these young people, and they're from really far places. Sometimes they don't have Wi-Fi or anything, but they made a good quality music video, and you got like whatever 15 kids in the video, and this is their chance to kind of show the world. And they sing about their life. They sing about how it is every day. And I just was so moved and touched. And I thought, that guy with that little mobile unit, he's making such a huge difference, because you would never hear of these people like at the end of the lake or the end of the road on the mountain pass. You wouldn't hear these people if the voice didn't get out to the world through that fellow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just thought it was so wonderful.
So yeah, don't you just love it? Hear those voices. Obviously, kids they have a unique perspective on the world, and kids these days, and it's hard to say it because like I used to be called a youth, but not anymore. So it kind of sucks that way.
Passes quickly.
Very quickly, and like my hairline that's running away from my face right now.
Me too.
But there was a kid from Canada, northern Canada. I can't remember actually said where he was from. We had a climate meeting summit in Poland, and he and a group traveled all the way down from Canada to Poland, and they had their like a mood board they made. They wanted to show it to the States, but they couldn't get into the UN, so they went to our coordination meeting. And I still remember to this day, there was I don't know what he was 15 years old. When you're 15 years old, like you should be worried about skipping curfew, kissing girls, whatever. That's what you should be worried about. The first thing that he said is, "I fear for my life. I fear for my community," and that hit us like a dynamite. All these indigenous representatives from all over the world, it hit us like a dynamite. Like, yeah, that this is actually what we needed to hear actually at that point. And which sparked this fire in our belly. These words of not only him, but like 12 literally kids. They traveled all the way from northern Canada to Poland, wanting to speak truth to power. And I was the chair of the coordination meeting back then, and I was like, hey, but what do you want to do? Like, we wanted to talk to states, but we can't get into the UN. So I looked to my co-chair and my friends. And I said, yeah, let's make this happen. So the next day, we organized a meeting, a panel with member states. And we said, all right, because this is what we wanted to do. And we asked them, we are creating this opportunity for you guys. Just say the word. Who wants to speak? If you want to speak, all of you. If everyone wants to say something, one of you wants to say something, by all means. But we want to create this opportunity for you guys. And two of them stood up, scared, nervous, obviously. But I told them, I said, hey, what you guys said is what we needed to hear. And we're family. We're also indigenous, let alone what these new people need to hear it as well. Because they are these country representatives. These are negotiators. They need to hear it as well. And you just the light went they went on. The lights went on. They're like, yeah, let's do this. And these two kids, they sit in front of everyone. A lot of indigenous peoples, these experts, and these member states, and they just share like, well, this is how I live. This is my community, and this is what I want to protect. And that was so profound, so authentic, that it really made an impact to everyone. And I think it also helped us to to get faster towards the end goal of some negotiations. So I definitely value the role and the energy of indigenous children, definitely, because there were kids in these important and somewhat also complex meetings or themes like climate change and climate change adaptation.
Now, I have a question for you. You were saying that, okay, you see the kids and you say, well, you're indigenous, I'm indigenous. So there's kind of like this instant connection, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was living in Asia, right? So I see a white guy on the street, and I don't know why. You see a white guy, they turn away, or they look at you with daggers in their eyes, like they want to like beat you up. And I'm like, where's the camaraderie? With the white skin. But then I had some African Canadian friend. He came there and visited me in the city, and he saw another African guy walking down the street, and they're like, "Hey, brother." And I was like, I felt jealous, Can I change my skin color so I can have that fraternity with all the bros and the sisters, But I was just wondering, obviously I can't change the color of my skin. I can't, I know some people, they do that tanning or that skin coloring, but it won't work. But I can't go, okay, you're indigenous, I'm indigenous. But I can appeal to common humanity, which sounds kind of like superficial. It's like, obviously we're all human. Like, what do you think? I'm a tree or a plant? But can we like appeal to each other's common humanity another way? Can we say, well, hey, how about this? I'm on the same page. My values, even though it doesn't show up on my skin, but it shows up down here, deep, deep down. My values are the same, even though I'm not indigenous, because I was just thinking, how can the two sides bridge the gap without being hypocritical, without doing tokenism, by being genuine?
I think
question. Huh?
It's a big question. It's a recent question. It's a big issue. But however, you said it already. The last word that you said, genuine. Like you authentically, want to learn. You want to contribute, and by the conversation that we had just now, but also like previous conversation, like like it is. You have an interest in you want to contribute, and I think indigenous peoples in general, or the majority of it at least, we're skeptical. We're very skeptical.
Should be skeptical.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because there are people out there that just don't know, or just want to help out. But so you can be skeptical, but you don't have to be by definition skeptical.
Like over skeptical.
But obviously there's I'm speaking from my own context, so I can definitely not speak from the context of the First Nations or Métis or Inuit, for example. However, you do realize that what we do, the principles that we deploy, the empathy, reciprocity, consent and respect, and all these very love and all these things, is what makes us human. And indigenous peoples have been able to maintain that since time immemorial. But it doesn't mean that is what makes us indigenous. What makes us human. So in a way, if you approach us with empathy, you deploy consent, respect, it will, and that's where reciprocity comes in. That's I think that is something that's is what is happening. What's happening more and more around the world right now. Could be more, but there are also I have to acknowledge that as well. There are people that have a certain savior complex when it comes to indigenous peoples. But
the white savior thing.
Well, not necessarily white though, but they do have a savior complex. But we're able to pick them out. but people like yourself and other, we call them allies. We don't call them non-indigenous people. We call them allies. And like you authentically, you're genuinely want to help out. So it is just keep on doing what you do. And I think, you're already you're helping us. You're helping amplify our message already by doing your podcast, inviting me. I'm not saying that I'm the spokesperson for all the indigenous peoples. God no, because I don't think I don't think everyone would agree with that. But it is you're doing your own. You're contributing to the movement in a way, and that is
right. Because I just keep thinking, like, how can to move forward, there's got to be some way to break this us and them mentality, right? Because we're always putting ourselves on the opposite side of the river, so to speak. And it's just, you said the word empathy, which basically means putting yourselves in the shoes of other people. And if we can do that all the time, then it's helpful for the situation and for communication, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you're doing it. I think your podcast is a very good platform for that, to provide to. You're not coming in with assumptions. You're asking questions, and that's already a good thing. You're not putting your own views forward or your own opinion in this, at least on me. So that is. If you want to take away this us them vibe that you feel that's going on, continue doing what you're doing. Continue doing a podcast, creating this platform, and just include, because we all need views from all sides, all indigenous peoples as well. We not only need our own views, but we also need the views of the people that are against us, because we need to understand why they're against us. Why that's like negotiation 101. 90% of negotiations is trying to find information. It's trying to find find out what is not what they want, but what is it that they need. What do they fear losing? It's trying to dig deep, and it's trying to find out what makes them tick. And that's 90% of the work. 10% of the work is implementation. That's the actual writing the document itself, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But that's what you're doing with your podcast.
Just stumbling along. So,
no,
but you're not. I don't think you're stumbling along. Now, what are your dreams? Like, I know you're you've been doing this for a few years, and you're kind of like blossoming. You're putting more stuff on social media. You're trying to encourage the younger generation. So I wonder, what are your dreams moving forward?
First of all, my dream is that the Maluku nation, where I'm from, to regain its independence. That is the biggest dream.
Right.
I don't want to be a president or whatsoever or something. That's not what I want to do. But I want to help shape it. I have a vision for that, and I want to help realize that vision. That's just for my indigenous peoples, indigenous peoples in general. Like I said, to inspire and empower so that they can do what inspires them. So give them wings.
That on your TikTok.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's on my profile and pretty much everywhere actually. And it's really to to say, hey, this is your idea. You don't have to conform according to international law or whatever, and try to fit into that mold. You want to do what you do. Let me help you figure it out, how you can use the system, the UN system, or anything that's out there to make that a reality. And that is my dream, that all indigenous peoples can thrive and are inspired and feel fulfilled and be part of this global community that respects them as equals and not just as let's ask these indigenous peoples for opening ceremony, or like a dial 555 dial an elder, something like that. Like, that's not what we're here for. We're here to do serious business, which is trying to make this planet work for everyone. That's not everyone, but that we can all inhabit this planet in peace and let Mother Earth can also live in peace. So that is what's my dream. And I know that I'm not, and the funny thing is, it is a dream that's so big that I might not be able to achieve it in my lifetime, but I sure love to chip away every day, trying to make that dream a reality.
I read the definition of between conservative and progressive, and they were saying conservative means you kind of want to conserve, preserve what is the status quo, what is the normal, so-called normal things as they go along. But then the word progressive means you want things to get better. And sometimes the dreams that you have, they seem foolish. They're like, oh my God, it's going to take forever. We can't solve this. This is like centuries long problem and it's never going to be solved. But the people who make change are the ones who will take these big, audacious or whatever, these big, weird looking dreams. They look so strange in the beginning, but they fight on and fight on and fight. And then it happens. And it's like, feel like it's a miracle that this could ever happen. And yeah, I just thought about that when I saw about your dream, because I think that if they're well thought out, and for example, you've learned from your elders, you've learned their wisdom, and you find out, well, my generation, we can do what we're able to during our time. And then we pass the baton to the next generation. So I think that's exactly what you're doing, is it not?
Yeah, it is actually. And it is something you said earlier, what that was so, I should have put it. So it resonated a lot with, very resonated with me that the whole idea of the podcast and my dream and everything else is, holy shit, now I lost my train of thought. I was so excited. What did you say, like the last couple of
I was just talking about the whole dream thing. Sometimes it's like people think change has to be incremental. It's going to take forever. But sometimes these dreams, if you pound away at them,
you have to chip away at them. Yeah, like
it can happen.
Yeah. The two things that you need to keep in mind with dreams or goals. You need to have the big, hairy, audacious goals. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
You have to need this pie in the sky. That is what you need to have. But if you have a very big dream or a goal, you need to have patience to make that happen. However, that's on a macro level. On the micro level, you need to do whatever is possible day in, day out to get closer to that goal. But you need to have patience for the big thing to manifest. Now, I use it a lot, but I always forget to use to say who actually came up with that quote. Is that never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world.
Yeah.
But because it's the only thing that ever has, so that is something that we also need to all need to keep in mind, that there's that it all starts with one crazy idea. And I read books. I read a lot of books. And the author by the name of Joe Dispenza wrote Becoming Supernatural. And he said, and he goes into like using the power of mind. And what I loved about it is like, it's not about cause and effect. It is about causing an effect. So you make steps, you work day in, day out, and then something will shift, and that will help you make a leap, and then you do some more so small but significant steps, and then it's all about causing an effect. And that is what I love to do. Like it is working day in, day out as much as humanly possible, because then again, you could die tomorrow, or in 5 minutes. And that's why I document a lot, everything. That's why I try to do as much as humanly possible on a given day. Doesn't mean that I don't take any vacation or that I don't take a rest. of course, that's super important. But it is, if you have this big goal and you really can taste it, every fiber in your body really wants to contribute to it. That is not just yourself, but like all indigenous peoples all around the world, that they can do what inspires them. Then like that's the juice, that keeps you going, and there's no stopping actually. And the funny thing is, because of my enthusiasm, other people look at my listen to my podcast or YouTube, or might not be right now, but maybe in a couple of years, a couple of months time, they see like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. It's also like a little bit of self-awareness, I think, as well, is also a super big part of that. It is, this is what I love to do, and this is where I thrive. This is people call me a machine when I'm in the UN, and because I love to do it. And people have to find indigenous peoples not indigenous peoples, but like we can also try to find something that we love to do, and let that be contribution to self-determination. It can be in arts, it can be painting, it can be being a butcher or whatever. It is trying to find something that you love to do and be very good at it. Mm-hmm. And this happens to be my niche, I think, because I'm still young. And,
you are. Just keep going, bro.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, Ghazali, for being here. And it's been wonderful to get your wisdom. I could probably talk for 6 hours, but you've said a lot.
You should go on my podcast at some point.
Okay, sure. I'm not indigenous, but I'm a wannabe.
Oh no, but my podcast is like I have long form conversation with interesting people.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so like
anytime.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, yeah. So you have yourself a wonderful weekend and enjoying whatever you're enjoying. And you're in the middle of this UN thing. So yeah, go get them. Go with the flow.
Appreciate it. But thank you so much.
Flow. Okay, so thank you so much, and we have just a great time there at the UN and whatever you're doing. Take care.
Take care. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. And that's a wrap. This was a great conversation. Thanks to our inspiring guest, Ghazali Ohorella, for joining me at the Multi-Hazards podcast. And a little disclaimer here first. This podcast is meant to be educational and does not try to offer legal, medical, or other specific advice unless otherwise noted. You got that? And second, the opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of the organizations that either my guests or I are working for. So, here as I conclude this episode, thanks to you, my wonderful listeners, for joining us today. Stay safe out there and stay tuned for more episodes. This is Vin Nelson wishing you the best on your journey of surviving and thriving with all that life throws at you. Cheers to you all. Peace out.